Welcome to Out of the Blank.
Welcome to another episode of Out of the Blank podcast. Gary, it's a pleasure to have you back on the show. You're going to hopefully break down a little bit about Oswald and his travel, where he went, when did he get there, how did he get there, who he talked to. Can you just take me basically to the first place he went to? I'm guessing that's the radio factory in Minsk, right?
Well, you mean after he goes to Russia? Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Let's talk a little bit about his time in the Marines first, because that leads him into Russia. And of course, a lot of it's a mystery, but basically what happened was Oswald was stationed in Japan at Atsugi, which was a CIA base. It was not only a CIA base, it was a U-2 base, and it was an MK Ultra base. So right away you get suspicious as to what was going on with Oswald. Why was he allowed to bring subversive material in the mail, communist things, talk about it? Suddenly he is involved with a Japanese girl at a club called the Queen Bee. Now the Queen Bee was mostly for officers, rich. It cost a lot of money to go there, like a country club almost. And it was a center for spying, international spies. And they had like 80 women that worked there that were basically prostitutes. And that they were signed by different people to get information from the personnel that hung out at the Queen Bee. Somehow Oswald is going there on his salary, which is he couldn't possibly afford. And he is dating a Japanese girl. And he goes to according to his friend David Bucknell, he went to his commanding officer and told him that this Japanese girl was trying to get information from him. And his commanding officer said, let me talk to someone, CIA, naval intelligence, whatever. And so he gets a meeting with a guy who he didn't know who it was. And they encourage him to continue dating this girl, this Japanese girl, as part of his patriotic duty to help his country. So when he gets involved with this girl, then he gets involved with Japanese communists. And he leaves and goes on weekends. He would go into Japan, into Tokyo, and he would hang out with these communists. Obviously, this is when he became a contact. You know, that the CIA or someone or naval intelligence was using him as a dangle to the communists. Okay, so that's when this all started.
How old was he when he was doing this?
He was he was probably 18, 19. And maybe more. Let's see. He was born in 39.
He joined the Army or
49,
the
59.
Marines.
No, he was probably in his early 20s.
He joined the
20.
Army and the Marines when he was 16, right?
Well, he tried. He joined the Marines, but he didn't get accepted because he was underage. But he enlisted when he was 17.
Okay.
So that's how it started. And so he eventually is on ONI's radar. Now, the Office of Naval Intelligence at the time was supposedly running a false defector program to the Soviet Union, and they were running it out of Nags Head, North Carolina. And Oswald told one of his friends on the base that he was going to go to Russia and he'd come back in 61 or 2 and be a hero. This is what he believed. So he gets out of the Marines with an early discharge because a box of candy fell on his mother's head or something. I mean, some ridiculous thing. So they give him this early discharge, which was not that early, but it was before he was supposed to get out. And he goes to New Orleans and he stays 3 days with his mother.
Time out. Was it a forced early discharge? Did he want to go?
No, he wanted to go.
Okay, so why do you keep telling me? You told me in the past that he hated his mother. Why is he taking care of her?
He does hate he just used that as a reason. She wrote a letter for him saying she needed him to support her, and he got her to do that. He hated her. But we skipped over while he was in Japan. He got gonorrhea. This is what we were talking about.
How do you know?
And I have a document. I have the document. And in the document, it says at the bottom, in the line of duty.
He was pumping for information.
This was the Japanese girl, probably. And it says it's not his, he's not to be punished. It's in the line of duty. Now, what does that mean? Except that he was, encouraged to infiltrate with these Japanese, this woman for spy purposes.
Where did you get the document from? Is that from the archives?
It's available. I'll send it to you.
Okay.
I'll send it to you. It's in my book.
I know.
My book.
I know. I'm just curious to where you got it from, because
It's been so long ago, I don't remember where I got it. But
well, it's why Mary Farrell's suing the for the release of the documents, suing Biden for that, is that they've been slowly redacting documents that they had previously unredacted and classifying it again. So
this one's been available for a long, long time.
Okay.
It was discovered probably. It probably came out during the 70s or 80s, because I've had it forever. So anyway, putting this into this, what I try to do when I research this, I try to get inside Oswald's head. He's doing things to incriminate himself, but why? What does he think he's doing? So he decides to leave his mother. He's there for 3 days. He gets on a boat in New Orleans, and he gets his visa, and he puts down all the countries he wants to travel in. One of them is Russia, but he also lists England and a lot of other countries, France. But skipping over this, going back a little bit. In the meantime, he enrolls in Albert Schweitzer College in Switzerland, which is a college that nobody ever heard of. I mean, it's non-credit, and it has like maybe 50 or 60 students total from all over the world. And it's run by the Unitarian Church, pretty much. The only way you could find out about it, they went, how did Oswald know about this church? Well, it turns out that Allen Dulles and the CIA were using the Unitarian Church to benefit their intelligence community. And it's complicated, but anyway, and that was one of the deals. So how did Oswald find out about this? And how did he get accepted? Well, for a long time, I thought, how can he get accepted when he didn't graduate high school? But I saw in his brother's book, his brother wrote a book about Lee. And of course, his brother thinks that he did it. He's guilty, but there's still always things in there that are enlightening. And he says that Oswald got a GED while he was in the Marines. Okay, that makes sense. So he sends this deposit and gets accepted for the fall semester, I think it was. and he writes on his visa that he's going to go see these countries, and he's going to school at Albert Schweitzer College. And so he gets the visa and he gets on a boat and he goes to France. He never shows up at Schweitzer College, ever. Now, this is where Oswald began to be spied on pretty much, because his mother wrote to the State Department and everybody wanting to know where her son was. She wrote a letter to Albert Schweitzer College, and they said, "We don't know. He's never showed up, blah, blah, blah." And she had sent him $25. And so they sent the check back. Check came back. Of course, the FBI and CIA knew this because they're opening our mail. And this is when the whole thing starts about Hoover saying that Oswald is in the Soviet Union and someone may be impersonating him and using his birth certificate. And that all came from Marguerite Oswald. So Oswald, now this is a real key point in Oswald's travels, is he went into Russia through Helsinki, Finland. Okay. This was one of the few ways you could get a quick visa into the Soviet Union. And the reason was there were two diplomats there. One was an American CIA guy, and the other guy was KGB. And they were buddies, and they used to go out and drink. And they said, well, how can we speed up the defectors getting into the country so that, and they came up with this plan, whatever it was. So Oswald knew to go to Helsinki to get a quick entry into Russia, which nobody should have known. I mean, not very many people knew. So someone is coaching him, telling him how to do this. He lands in France. He takes a plane to England, and he gets to Finland in like 24 hours. He gets his visa and everything, which is almost impossible. So he's got help all this way on his travels. Now, what I think happened was Robert Webster defected 2 weeks before Oswald. And I think that what happened was, at this point, naval intelligence was sending him there as a false defector, a dangle. The Soviets could maybe pick him up. Maybe he could find out stuff. At this point, I believe that Jim Angleton, in his search for a mole in the CIA, picked up Oswald and made him a mole detector. Him and Webster were dangles, false dangles. And their purpose was they sent out information about them that was maybe not true, maybe a little off, wrong address, wrong mother's name, something. And these tidbits, if they came back to Angleton in counterintelligence, then he would know that was the mole that found that out, because no one else could know that. It's complicated. It's called a bent card trick. So he was there, and Angleton had been told that there was a mole in the U2 program.
Is this Poplov's mole that Jefferson Morley wrote about?
No, that's separate. Popov was a mole, was a Russian agent that was here working for us. In fact, he eventually went back to Russia and was killed. They killed him. It was either Popov or another defector that worked for the CIA that told Angleton that there's a mole inside the CIA. It's probably in the Soviet Russia division. So Angleton did not take out a 201. And you know what 201 is?
Mm-mm.
Okay. The CIA, anybody that they're watching, or anybody that does something like go to Russia or be a defector or anyone they're interested in, they create a 201 file. And Oswald goes to Russia in 59, and there's no 201 file. Okay. What happened was a guy named Otto Otepka was in the State Department, and he was really good at his job. he had won all kind of awards, and he was looking at this list of defectors, and Oswald stands out to him as something's wrong here with this guy. So he writes to the FBI and the CIA. He says, is this a real defector, or is this one of your guys? And all of a sudden, they not only won't give, he finds a security blanket around Oswald. Can't mention that name. And he gets suspicious. So he starts his own file on Oswald, and he puts it in his safe in his office. His office is broken into. The safe is broken into. And Oswald's file is missing, but nothing else is missing but Oswald's file. And Otepka's career was basically ruined. They went after him after that. Robert Kennedy, particularly, sent somebody to watch him and all this stuff. So it's really strange that Oswald was being protected like this in the Soviet Union.
So the purpose of the false defector program was that these people would go over to another country, say that they defected over there, then they would hopefully get intelligence from the other country that might pick them up.
They wanted the Soviets to pick them up
Okay.
and turn them against us.
And that would actually give us more information.
But they would really be us. And they're all, both sides are trying to fake each other out all the time, and it's ridiculous. And up to that point, that program didn't work because the Russians could see through it. They knew these guys, some of them were being sent there, there were a whole bunch of defectors in 59, 60, way more than there were before. So that's an indication that there's a program going on.
There's a document that states that even the Russians didn't believe that. They thought he was double agent because his Russian was terrible. There's just so many things weird about his profile that didn't work. And I'm pretty sure that's where his visa or his tear up his U.S. citizenship was also denied by the Russian.
Well, but Webster got citizenship in the Soviet Union.
So did Webster have a better profile than Oswald did that got through security?
I think they believed that Webster was a real defector, and which he was, because his main reason for if you take Rand development out of the equation, Webster goes there, falls in love with a Russian girl. His burden at home, his family, his wife is sickly and they're in debt and he's not happy at home. So he gets mixed up with this girl. And that's what the Russians believe. Now, of course, he was also involved with Rand, which is a CIA front, and so he was also doing, he had a code name, a Guide 223, which was an Air Force, I believe, thing. And so he was definitely a contact, at least, but they felt more comfortable with Webster, whereas Oswald was different. He came there, but Webster had visited there 3 times and then decided he wanted to stay, and they watched him for a year and decided he was okay and gave him citizenship, but they didn't give it to Oswald, because I think you're right, they didn't trust him. In fact, when he came to Moscow, and he told his tourist guide that he wanted to stay and defect, and she hooked him up with her boss, and they looked at his record and they decided, no, you're leaving. They wanted him out within like 48 hours.
Did you look into his profile at all? Like, if someone caught Oswald's file and saw that there was a security blanket around it, and the Russians are seeing something about Oswald that's not matching up, do you think that his file would have been, or his profile would have been too perfect to fit the description of what a defector would be?
Well, they were watching him. They had a friend, one of his best friends in there was a son of a Russian general, like in the KGB or something.
Is that the guy who wrote a book about Oswald?
No, that guy, that's a book you really need to read, though, because that guy was really his friend. And he shows a side of Oswald that you don't see anywhere else. They were buddies for a year or two, and he got to know him very well. And he just writing a book about his experiences with Oswald. He's not making an agenda or anything. But and there's a lot of enlightening stuff in there. This guy was named Golovichov, and he was spying on Oswald. He was his friend, and there's KGB pictures of them standing together on a street corner in Russia talking. He was under surveillance. His apartment was bugged, especially when he married Marina. They had bugged everything, and Norman Mailer got access to all that stuff when he went over there, which no one else could. I don't know how he did it.
Now, at this point, is Russia and the American government, besides Angleton or whoever Oswald's handler is, at this point, are they kind of looking at Oswald like he's getting a taste for the cuisine in Russia and might be switching sides in a sense?
No, I don't think so.
I'm still confused
This
on.
is where the MK Ultra thing comes in. I think that Oswald's personality was split into defector and loyal American. And so when he went over there, the Russians could interrogate him all they want, just like Dallas police did, and they would get nothing because he was genuine. That side of his personality believed himself to be a Marxist, and that he was telling the truth, and he was going to give them secrets and so forth. Then when he comes home, the patriotic side is telling everything that happened that the other personality did while he was there. That was the whole beauty of creating a defector that way, through hypnosis and drugs and whatever.
Yeah, LSD and things
Because
of
now
that sort.
you've got someone over there. They can't break him. They could torture him, whatever they want, and they're not going to break him. And the Dallas police couldn't break him.
Well, the thing that I question is his psychological exams is usually what people bring up about Oswald. Like, how could he be a double agent with such a crazy psychological exams? Now, if you look into MK Ultra, that was a lot of the people that they were picking, people with split personalities, people in mental institutions to try their drugs out on. There's actually a new film out about MK Ultra. I don't think it's good at all. It's not historically accurate, which sucks because with MK Ultra, you could have just went by the documented cases we have and it would have been way better. The issue that I have with it is that the way the film depicts it is they take a person who's in the middle of getting a lobotomy. A kid is getting a lobotomy, and the phone rings, and they have them cancel the lobotomy. We're going to put them in this alternative program. Then the next scene is there's like 5 people in these two-way mirrors that are behind these little things, and they're given LSD. Now, to an audience member, they go, "Oh, well, this is better than getting a lobotomy, right?" Oh, well, that's not what it was. They were drugging people in prisons. They were drugging people in mental institutions because they believed nobody's going to believe a prisoner and nobody's going to believe someone who's in a mental institution.
Right. Well, I don't know. I mean, my take is they were looking for people who were susceptible to
Hypnosis.
hypnosis, and he certainly was. They were looking for people that were had problems. Then they were looking for people that maybe had leanings a certain way, and him being already involved in Japan, he was into the mechanisms that was going on. So I don't think it was that they went out and picked Oswald. It was because he had gotten involved with the Japanese communists in Japan, and he had done well. He had kept secrets. He had come back and told them what they need, and they kind of trusted him. And they thought, here's a guy that would be a good defector. And so he starts his spewing of Marxism in the Marines, and
Is that when he's playing like communist music or things of that sort
yes,
inside the
yeah,
barracks?
and
Okay.
playing the red pieces in chess, and using, instead of saying yes or no, he said "niet" and "da," Russian, and
Yeah, that was really
they called him Oswaldskovich because he was always spewing. Now, how do you get away with doing that
that's what I'm saying.
in
It's so
in
weird.
the
It's like that
1950s?
that has to be a
In the
fake.
1950s, here's a Marine spouting Marxist ideas, and nobody punishes him. And then he goes to Moscow, and he goes to the American embassy, and he says, I'm going to uh, tell all the secrets I have. I'm going to give them to the Russians. That I'm going to be loyal to them. I'm, and here's my passport. I don't want it. I'm going to become a Soviet citizen. Now, this is in the American embassy in Moscow, which is bugged by the Soviets. Oswald knew it was bugged by the Soviets. And that's why he's saying this stuff. So the Soviets can hear me. I'm a defector. I'm going to give you secrets. And they really wanted secrets about the U-2 because it was flying over all their, the country and taking pictures at random of anything they wanted. And they couldn't deal with it. It was up too high. So they wanted that information. So meanwhile, think about this. So here he is. He throws his passport down and he says, I'm defecting. I'm going to give secrets to the Russians. And then 2 years later or 3 years later, he wants to come home.
Well, before we go home, when did he meet Marina?
Okay. He met Marina in 61.
Because she had
And
other husbands as
that's a
well, too.
long story, too. And I think the Soviets were planting women with defectors and sending them back as sleeper agent type things. And she knew Webster. So I think she was trying to get one of those two to take her back, and she did. But he met her at a dance at the Palace of Culture in Minsk, and they married like a month later. It was a whirlwind courtship, and most of that courtship, he was in the hospital with supposedly, I think it was adenoids or something. He got sick. He got some kind of problem, and they had kept him in the hospital for 2 or 3 weeks, and she came and visited him every day in the hospital. And so then he proposed to her and they got married. And then he tells her, I want to go back, okay, to the United States. So then when he wants to come back, the government lends him 400 and some dollars to come back. And his brother lends him $200 to fly from New York, where the plane landed, to Dallas. And he pays this all back in 3 months. And he's part of that time. Just a few months, he pays the whole thing back when he's not working or he's making $1.25 an hour and his wife's having a baby and he's, his food, rent, all this stuff's coming out of it. Nope, he had no money. And yet he pays back $600.
I know it's weird.
In just a few months.
We need to break this down a little bit just because I gotta clear up this area on Oswald. It's still very, very hazy. When he marries Marina, Marina had other relationships before Oswald. She had a couple American people that she also was spending a lot of time with, and either I don't know if it was married or were in relationships with. When you say sleeper agent, is it just possible that instead of going the sleeper agent aspect, we look at maybe that she was looking at him as a free ride to go live in this country?
Well, I do. I think that's exactly what she wanted. Now, she may have been. Her uncle was MVD, and so she may have been part of that program. But knowing Marina, and she's very self-centered person, she's agreeing to the Soviets to do this, and then she's, when I get over there, I'm staying. She's a capitalist at heart.
And that would explain later when she was interrogated in fear of deportation, that if she does go back to her country, they might just do something bad to
Well, that's
her.
true. That's true. She didn't want to go back, and she was spoiled here, and she got pretty wealthy after he assassinated the president. People sent her a lot of money. She wrote articles. She sold his some of his stuff that he had, and got a lot of money for it. And so and then she remarried, and she did very well here.
I came across a document of J. Edgar Hoover giving a message to the people that were holding Marina Oswald. I don't know if it was Secret Service or other FBI
Secret
agents,
Service.
but he said that they could leverage deportation to her, but don't actually like do it. It's just a threat. It's not a actual thing. So it was just a muscling tactic.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you want to defend her, imagine that you're in a foreign country and you don't speak the language and you have 2 little babies and they're threatening you, and she grew up in the Soviet Union. So you know what they treated their people like. You get shot if you did anything, So she's afraid. She's 22 years old. She's afraid that she doesn't want to be deported. So she tells them whatever they want to hear. at first. But she lied so many times that even the Warren Commission didn't believe her. And so, there's never any reason. She made up stories. She did all kind of things. She was very unreliable. But I think you're right. She wanted to stay here and she was afraid and they were going to deport her. And so she cooperated. She said anything she wanted.
Well,
They wanted to hear.
before we even break that down, when Oswald received money to go back home, um, his brother sent him money. Did his brother know at the time that he was married? When did Oswald's mother find out that he was married?
Well, he started writing to them when he started to the paperwork to come back. Uh, and he informed them that I'm coming home, and he needed some letters written like by his mother or different people because they needed, like for Marina, they if she came to the United States, they wanted to make sure she was supported and wasn't going to go on welfare or do all this stuff. So, and this is really a bizarre. We could go out into left field with this. Marguerite contacted this guy that she hardly knew. She worked for him as a nurse or something.
A pool boy.
And the guy wrote a letter saying that he'd take responsibility for Oswald and his wife coming to the United States. Paul Blau has researched that very well. You need to ask him about that. It's really bizarre. Why would somebody do that? Take a chance. And then Oswald goes out and kills the president. He's responsible for bringing him into the country.
How old was the guy?
Hmm?
How old was
he
the
was? Oh, he was a professional. He was. I don't remember if he was a military guy or a big businessman in Dallas or somewhere. And she worked for him just for a while. And she asked him to do this, and he does it. And it was very strange. But Paul's the expert on that, so check with him on it. But basically, he wrote to them ahead of time saying he was coming home. So Robert knew that he was coming, and then he got into New York, and he wanted his mother or his brother to contact, or somebody to contact, like the welfare and have them pay for the trip. He didn't. His brother said, "I'll pay for it." He said, "No, I want them, the welfare thing to pay for it." And finally, they wouldn't or whatever. And so his brother sent him $200 and some to fly from New York to Dallas. But he paid all that money back in a short time with no income. And so that tells you he's getting money from somebody, FBI, CIA, somewhere. He's getting an allotment to pay for this stuff and pay for his travels. He's flying. This kid was 24 when he died, and he's been more world travel than Donald Trump. I mean, he's been all over the world. He gets a visa in 24 hours to go to any country he wants. He goes to Mexico, he goes to Russia, he goes everywhere. He was in, and then in the Marines, he was in the Philippines, he was in Japan. So he's really something behind him is making this all possible.
Opening up doors.
Yes, opening up doors for him and paying for it.
When he gets back into the United States, where did he go first? When does he end up in Dallas? Does he stop at New Orleans at any point?
He came back and he went to Fort Worth. And he lived with his mother in an apartment for not very long because they hated each other. He hated her.
With Marina, correct?
Yeah.
Now,
yeah,
is the baby born? The baby was already born?
They have one baby, was born in Russia. She's pregnant. He gets a job at Lee's Welding for $1.25 an hour or whatever. And you wonder about how he gets jobs when he's a defector. You know how people were in the 50s. They want references and stuff. He told him he was in a Marine. He was an ex-Marine. So he got this job at this $1.25 an hour, whatever. He lives with his mother for, I don't know, a couple weeks or something. And then he moves in with he can't stand it anymore. He moves in with his brother and his brother's wife. And I think they had a kid. And that was for maybe a month or two. I don't know. And then he finally got their own apartment. He got another, and he quits the job at Lee's Welding. This is after he met DeMorenshildt. Okay. DeMorenshildt met him when he had the apartment after he moved out of his brother's house and moved into this it was kind of a dumpy apartment. DeMoore became friends with him, and DeMoore gets him this job at Jaggers, Childs and Stovall, which is a printing company, makes maps for the Army and it's got, at the time he worked there, the Cuban Missile Crisis was going on, and they had photos of the missiles at San Cristobal there at Childs, Jaggers and Stovall. Now you've got to get security clearance to work a place like that. How did Oswald get that job? DeMoore got him that job. I still don't know how. He worked there for a while, and that's where he supposedly learned photographic skills.
Okay, back her up real quick. I'm sorry. I got to do this just so I can understand this. I'm slowly learning all of this. I think from the last time we've talked, I was very, new to the assassination. Now I know a lot of things, at least a little bit more than I did before. I'm not a researcher or an expert in any sense.
Knowledge is dangerous.
Yeah. I'm not a researcher or expert in any sense of the word. I'm just interested. But when it comes to Robert Lee and Lee, when they left or when they separated from each other, when he left his apartment with his wife and everything like that, did any of them give a description or give a account of the time that Lee spent with his wife and the baby at his brother's house? Did his brother make any statements that if he liked Marina or not? The relationship, what was the relationship like?
Well,
because they beat each other back and forth. I want to understand when that started happening.
This takes us back. He lived with when he was about 12 years old, 13 years old. And he was living with his mother. She was moving around all the time. They briefly moved in with Robert and his wife. Or was it John Pick?
Jesus, Gary, don't get me more confused.
He moved in with his brother. I think it was Robert, but it might have been John. And his wife. And there was an episode, of course, there was constantly fighting between Marguerite and everybody. And she didn't buy them any food, and they couldn't afford, they had a baby and they couldn't afford to keep 2 more people. And Lee was a teenager and he was a problem. And there was an incident in that supposedly Lee pulled a knife on Pick's wife after Pick wasn't home, or if it was Robert, I can't remember. And so she had her husband throw them out. Well, Marguerite's story was that he was whittling wood. He had a penknife and he was whittling wood, and he didn't really mean to do anything. He just waved it at her or something.
What do you believe? Do you believe that he threatened her with a knife, or do you believe he was whittling wood?
I believe he was whittling wood, but he may have threatened her with the knife. It was a very volatile home life with Marguerite. There was constantly arguments and fights and constant moving from one place to another. And that's hard on a kid. If I was 13, I don't know what I'd do. That may be an indication. But what the indication is that none of the family got along very well. The boys were, him and Robert were the closest. But even Robert ended up saying he did it, and he's guilty. There was an interesting episode. The last time they ever got together was Thanksgiving dinner, 62. Okay. And they got together at Robert's house, I think. And they didn't invite Marguerite. But John Pick was there. All 3 brothers were there and their wives. And Pick hadn't seen him in a long time. And Pick was marveled at how different he looked, that he had changed so much. And this is where we get into the, was Oswald substituted somewhere along the line when, his looks when he went to Russia were different from when he came back. All of a sudden before he had this bull neck and he was a husky Marine. and he comes back and he's the skinny guy that died in Dallas to Jack Ruby. And there's a more remarkable difference in appearance. And John Pick was struck by that. And he mentioned that to the Warren Commission. He said, I really did. And he didn't really talk to him much. And he was offended because Oswald called him his half brother. And John said he had never done that before. They were always brothers. Now he's a half brother, which makes you wonder if it was the same Oswald that went away that came back.
I think if you look at like how relationships are, where someone gets in a relationship, they actually gain more weight than they did, or they get out of shape. But I mean, you can look at the basic high school people that played sports. When they get out, they either gain weight or they lose all their muscle mass. And I start thinking, I mean, if he was in the military, then gets involved in Russia with Marina plus a baby, the stress, either he's not eating to lose weight or he's just not taking care of himself that well.
Well, that's true, but his hairline changed drastically, and that doesn't happen in a year. Uh, he had thick hair when he went over there, curly. All of a sudden, it's thinning. He's balding. Uh, he's lost a lot of weight. He's not as, and he was acting different. So this is what speculation has caused all these books to be written. Was it the same Oswald? What was going on? Why was it different? Because this is a short period of time. We're not talking 10 years. We're talking he went in 59, and this was Thanksgiving 62. He went in fall of 59.
I think the speculation is fine because of the prior evidence to people using Lee's name. We know about the person in Mexico that used Lee's name. We know about a person at a gun range that talked about shooting targets and that he was going to do this to the president using Lee's name. It wasn't Lee. So
And Silvio Dio.
that speculation is in the right direction. I'm just curious to when he last sees his family, what events unfold afterwards. I mean, we got almost a full year um, change in a person to a point where I have the HSCA volumes too. When they interviewed Marina, she didn't know the difference between a rifle and a shotgun. Well, the Warren Commission states that she was listening to him reload and practice on his balcony. So we got to somehow get to there. So take me after his brother notices these changes in his half brother and notices his personality is different, his appearance is different. What starts to unfold next? We still got to figure out what happened with George de Mohrenschildt. When did he meet that guy?
He met de Mohrenschildt right after he came back to Fort Worth and Dallas. I think Jagger's Child Stovall was in Dallas, so he had to move into Dallas. And that may be when him and Marina were separated for a while. And so he lived in the apartment, I think. And he got that job at Jagger's Child Stovall, but that didn't last very long. He got fired. And I have a feeling that here's you got to look for consistencies in things. Oswald was sent to the Soviet Union as a dangle. Okay. One thing we left out was that when he went to the Soviet Union, shortly after he was there, like 1960, Francis Gary Powers gets shot down in a U-2, and he blames Oswald. And later on, he didn't, but at first he blamed Oswald because Oswald knew all the specs to give the Soviets the information they needed to shoot down the U-2. Later on, he blamed the CIA because he said it was sabotaged when he was in Turkey on purpose. What they wanted to do was stop the Paris peace talks that were coming up. Peace was going to break out. Eisenhower was going to Paris and talk to Khrushchev, and they were going to, thaw the Cold War. Well, the CIA didn't want that. So I don't think Oswald gave them any information that they needed. I think he was a patsy for the first time. We're gonna sabotage our own mission to break the peace talks down, and we're gonna use Oswald as the patsy. Oh, he did it. He told them how to shoot it down. So now he's working at Jagger's, Childs, and Stovall, and he's a dangle again. I mean, he's working there, and the Soviets would be how so happy the Soviets, the KGB would be to find out that they had a Marxist that had been to the Soviet Union working at a top secret, you know, film place like that. But they didn't would take him again. He was a patsy. I think he was a dangle again, and they didn't accept him that time either. So he's been a patsy, not just at the end at the Soviet, when he was in Dallas, but he was used as a patsy several times. He was perfect for the role. So we said he meets de Mohrenschildt. De Mohrenschildt gets him this job. De Mohrenschildt basically was responsible for separating him and Marina. He told him, get an apartment, do this, and let the Russian babysitters take care of Marina. This gives him a chance to do things, missions, jobs, whatever his assignment is. And then that brings us to the Walker shooting.
Well, before we get to the Walker shooting, at the Stovall Company, when he gets fired, do you know why he got fired? Because I think, did he
They
manipulate his,
said he was couldn't do the job, or he was not reliable, or
did he,
something.
did he manipulate his own photo and create the AJ Heidel ID? And did he also create the backyard photographs?
He said when he saw the photo, he
That's
said,
me, but that's not me.
That's my body, that's my head, but that's not my body. And I know photography, and I know how this was done, and I can show you how it was done. Whether he did it, no, I don't think so. I've always thought that it was Roscoe White.
That's what people say, but I said that I think he manipulated his that photograph of Roscoe White because he gave one to George de Mohrenschildt, and on the back of it it said Hunter a fascist. And I go, this is a person bragging to his
Yeah, but
friend who
who wrote Hunter a Fascist?
I think he might, like I said, I think he might have manipulated his own photograph. There's like 50 something copies of that photo.
Marina was thought to have written that. There were several photos. One was flushed down the toilet, and there were different poses. And there is a picture of Roscoe White with his head on
Yeah, I've seen
photo.
it.
And Roscoe White was in the same Marine base at Atsugi.
Well,
And Roscoe White went to the Philippines with him. And Roscoe White was an expert in photography. And Roscoe White gets a job at the Dallas Police just October
no,
before the assassination.
I think it's Roscoe White in that photo. I've seen them both lined
If
up,
you
and the
look at the
jaw.
chin
That's what I said. Is if
and
it,
the
yeah.
stance is
Well,
like
the only way that the chin could be like that if it was Oswald was that if he had a tooth infection, if he had something that would call his jawline to inflate, then that would be normal. And I've seen it. I've had a cracked tooth where my jaw has, it's an abscess. You get one of those. That would make it a possibility. But the thing is that if you kill the president, or if you allegedly kill the president and it's supposed to be this mad crazy person, you wouldn't be saying you're a patsy because then all the fame goes out the window. That means that there's going to be another person involved. And also, he looked like a person in these interviews that knew that someone who's higher up would know what to do to get out of this situation, and that's why he didn't do a lot of talking. But when he's in this interrogation room, he says, "Wait till this comes out. Someone will easily prove that that's not me." Is when I start going, if he manipulated his a different photograph, if he put his face on someone else's photograph to show off in front of George de Mohrenschildt, I think he would have wrote Hunter a fascist on the back as like a joke to his new friend or his friend he's trying to impress to think he's cool. Or I mean, that's just a common tactic a 24-year-old or someone would do.
if he did it, if he really posed that picture, the purpose was to sheep dip him as this mercenary Marxist,
100%.
so that maybe he could go to Cuba.
Nobody takes a photo with a .38 on your side, a rifle, and a papers.
He was put up to this to be, look, this is me. Castro will accept me in his revolution, and I can go down to Cuba, and I can. I mean, they're telling in his mind, he thinks that he's putting on this persona, and in real life, he's setting himself up. They're setting him up. Said, do this. This will make you look like, and then we have a mission for you in Cuba. Blah blah blah. So, what he thought and what was really going on were two different things. But that photo has been a real problem in so many ways. For one thing, Marina said she took it. Okay. And supposedly she had this cheap camera with a plastic lens that, one of these you hold and look down into it to shoot the picture
Yeah.
way back in the 50s, and it's plastic and it's pretty cheap camera. Oswald had 3 or 4 sophisticated cameras, and I don't know how could he afford them. One was a Minox spy camera. They cost $300-400 in 1961, and they were only available to the military and stuff. They weren't available to the general public where you could go out and buy one. He had a 3D camera. So why would he use this piece of junk to take his picture? Then the film was developed at uh, at a store, at a some kind of film development place, a camera shop. Oswald developed all his own film. He was cheap. He didn't want to spend any money like that. So that none of that makes any sense. Now I understand Marina was afraid. Yeah, okay, I took the picture. She didn't remember the camera. She didn't remember anything. And the funny thing about the camera was, they didn't know about it till Robert Oswald found it months after the assassination and uh, sent it to the FBI or something. So it showed up much later. Like everything seems to, it's so obviously planted to make him guilty. It's too much evidence. No idiot would do the things that he did to incriminate himself if he was really the assassin.
Well,
He would not.
some good evidence you could point to would be the idea or the video of Oswald handing out fair play for Cuba papers. How come there's just this person that's perfectly set up at the perfect time to record him doing this thing? And then he's on a radio show giving, talks to right-wing people and then also hanging out with, communists or this plagiarist. He's playing both sides, which makes you start to question, all right, who is this person? Now, the fair play for Cuba papers that he was allegedly handing out or that he was handing out, there's all these at multiple different institutions on college campuses, which makes it seem like was he one of these spotters at one of these college campuses looking, and this goes into the intelligence agency, the CIA, the FBI invasions on the campuses that they've been doing since basically the 1940s. Harvard and Yale are some of the biggest ones, and if you look at some of the Harvard and Yale professors that work there in the psychology department, Joyanne West and Sidney Gottlieb were in charge of the MK Ultra project. So they pick people from these institutions, and I've talked to people that still talk about that this goes on today. Specifically, a good example would be an aspect of someone that's studying China's foreign policies who's going to eventually go into China. The CIA would ask him, "Hey, can you write a paper on this for me?" And they would write the paper, give it to him, say, "There you go, man." They go, "Awesome. Well, since you did that favor for us, and here's a little bit of money for that," they accept it. They go, "Can you do us another favor?" "What's the other favor?" "I need you to go over there and I need you to study their foreign policy and spy on them and let us know what's going on." That happens today. That is real. There's
Yeah,
a whole aspect of this, but on
well,
these college
exactly.
campuses, they had fair play for Cuba papers and they had fair play for Vietnam. They had a bunch of different aspects of these communist papers. Now, there is a fake one called the Rational Observer, which was created by J. Edgar Hoover's FBI that would say things the opposite of what these activist papers would say. And it's supposed to try and convince people to, it's supposed to propagandize people to think like, no, the war's not bad. We're okay. We need to save and spread democracy and all these types of things. So now you're looking at these college institutions a little bit differently. And then Oswald's in the picture, and he is now getting a news film of him basically giving statements about Marxism and a bunch of these other things that completely do not fit his character of a person who's shy, a loser, and all of this. That doesn't make sense.
Well, Oswald, when he went to New Orleans, was his new mission was to draw out pro-Castro people. So he starts his own fair play for Cuba. Now, you gotta realize that the CIA was investigating, the Fair Play for Cuba committee in overseas, and FBI was investigating them at home. They were not just investigating, they were trying to ruin them in any way they could, linking them to a communist is a really good way just to show that they're subversive. So Oswald's job in New Orleans, first he starts out going to Tulane University and handing out pamphlets and talk and trying to at prove that certain professors were commies, you know. And then he gets this Fair Play for Cuba committee. Now you got to understand, New Orleans is completely there. There are very few pro Castro people in New Orleans, which so this makes no sense. Everybody there is anti-Castro. It's just a right wing domicile, and so he's working for Guy Bannister because he's got an office. Some of the pamphlets were stamped 544 Camp Street, which is Bannister, the building that Bannister was in at the time. He had a private detective agency, supposedly. But really what they were doing was they were training anti-Castro Cubans to sabotage, to go into Cuba and sabotage and maybe invade and do all kinds of things against Castro. So they had a base at Lake Pontchartrain in New Orleans, and they had a base in Miami. And the center was Bannister's office. So his basement was filled with guns, weapons to arm these Cubans to fight Castro. Oswald's job, I believe, was to infiltrate those Cuban groups. So he goes to the DRE was one of them. That was Bringuer. He goes into Bringuer's store and he says, "I'm with you guys against Castro, and I want to help. I want to be a member. I want to join your group." Well, right away, Bringuer thought he was FBI or CIA, or he didn't trust him at all. So Oswald says, "I'll bring you back my Marine handbook." He brings him back the Marine handbook the next day and leaves it there for him. This, how to blow up things. So 2 days later, like, Oswald's passing out Fair Play for Cuba pamphlets on a street corner a few blocks from Bringuer's store. And a Cuban guy, a friend of his, comes in and says, "Hey, this guy's passing out pro-Castro stuff over here." So he takes a bunch of people. They go over there. And strangely enough, photographers show up. Okay. And Bringuer tears the pamphlets out of his hand and throws them on the thing. And Oswald says, "Carlos, you want to hit me? Go ahead, hit me." And so they all get arrested. And the Cubans get off with a $10 fine or something. And Oswald elects to go to jail rather than pay the $10 fine. And Oswald goes into the jail and he asks to see an FBI agent. Think of that. So an FBI agent shows up and they talk for an hour, and Oswald gives him some information, and the guy leaves. Now, why would you call an FBI agent unless you were an informant? There's no other reason that I can think of that he would have called and asked for an FBI agent unless he was an informant for the FBI. He's informing on these groups of Castro, of radical pro-Castro people. And meanwhile, he's, trying to draw out, he's asking people to join this pro-Castro thing. So if somebody comes out and wants to join, he turns them over to Bannister, and they know he's a pro-Castro. That's what Oswald thinks he's doing. He thinks he's drawing them out, and thinks he's infiltrating. Well, the Cubans find out who he is, and here's the perfect patsy if we kill Kennedy. I mean, we get even with this guy. He's double-crossed us, and he's spying on us, and he's doing all this stuff. So that's what the whole New Orleans thing was about. And then from New Orleans, he goes to Mexico City. And that's, to me, Mexico City is the Rosetta Stone, because it proves that someone a few weeks before the assassination is trying to link Oswald to the Russians and the Cubans at that embassy, so that when he does kill the president, or whoever does, he's going to get blamed, and it's going to lead to Castro, and it's going to lead to Russia.
So he
And
actually did go to Mexico City.
he did well. That's another
God
amazing.
damn it, Gary. Damn it.
A lot of people think he didn't even go.
I
Now, here's
know.
the thing: they had all these cameras. This was the spy center. You don't understand what Mexico City was in '63. It was like Istanbul. All the countries had spies there. It was a spy. It was like Casablanca. It was a. Uh, everyone had spies. The Mexicans, the Cubans, the Russians, the Americans. So we had all the sophisticated network of tape recordings, pictures of anybody that went into the Russian or some embassy or the Cuban embassy, came out. They had tape recordings of them. There are no pictures of Oswald, according to the CIA. There are no. They have a picture of a guy coming out of the Russian embassy who's 35 years old, 6'2", athletic build, looks nothing like Oswald. And they said that they thought it was Oswald. And someone is using his name. So they have recordings of the guy calling the Cuban embassy, calling the Russian embassy, and they're talking. And what's strange about it, for one thing, is the guy at first speaks terrible Russian. Oswald spoke pretty well Russian. His wife thought he was a native of Russia when she met him. He did not speak this terrible broken Russian. Then the guy speaks Spanish. Oswald didn't speak Spanish. I mean, he might have known a few words, but I don't think he spoke the language fluently. When the two Warren commissioners heard the tapes, they said, it's not him. That's not him. That's not his voice. So what did the FBI and CIA do? The CIA says we don't have the tapes. We destroyed them routinely. We erased them. And then the tapes showed up. The FBI got the Warren Commissioner guys got to see it, got to hear it. So it's all bizarre. Now, saying that, maybe he wasn't there. By the same token, when he tried to get the visa at Cuban embassy, he needed photos. And he didn't have any. So he went away and came back the next day with photos. The ones you go in a booth, and they take your picture.
Yeah.
Remember those? And he had a bunch of photos. So supposedly there's photos. And he signed the visa. And supposedly it's his signature. So you can't completely expel that he was there because of that. And he supposedly, according to Marina, he told her he went to a bullfight there. So he may have been in Mexico City, but the shenanigans that were going on with the embassies may not have had anything much to do with him. And possibly, I think what I'm beginning to suspect is why the CIA covered up Mexico more than anything else. They had some kinds of secret operations going on. And somehow this Oswald showing up there, it caused a problem. That they would have had to reveal things that they were doing there that they didn't want revealed. In fact, at that time, they didn't even want revealed that they had photographs of everybody. And
That's what I said. If Oswald was in Mexico and J. Edgar Hoover's memo was actually disinformation out there because they needed Oswald not to be in Mexico so any of their other activities don't get highlighted, I think makes a lot of sense. Judge Thunheim, when he was on my show, he stated to me, he said the only reason that documents would still be redacted would be on situations where people alive, didn't want the document to be released. But he goes, everyone that would be involved in this would be dead. So the only other option that you can choose from is that the same tactics that they used back then, they're still using some of the same ones. And if that gets unredacted, that means any of the enemies are open to looking at the tactics that we are still using today. And I think that makes a lot of sense of why they might be using some. And I've talked to people who've studied intelligence agencies and espionage tactics in the British government and in the US. And the tactics don't really change that much. And we know from Watergate as well, too, what was going on for a while that they didn't bother to change and might still be going on today as well, too, in different various forms. Because, I mean, Manson, you got a bunch of other people that obviously MK Ultra notes were still going on long after they said they ended the program of it. So I mean, that would make sense why it would be a security risk because they might be using the same tactics that they used back then, still now. I mean, we know about the influence of media when it comes to the government aspect of things. I mean, there's a reason that J. Edgar Hoover, when he invaded FBI, or when his FBI invaded Hollywood, he stated that the good guys can shoot as much as they want, but the bad guys can only shoot a couple of times and they have to miss. It's the reason why when we see the FBI on screen, we think, oh shit, the badasses are here. It's all programmed in there. So I mean, it's not hard to think that they might be still using some same tactics. But I also bring up the 9/11 aspect of things. In 9/11, we trained a lot of those people that ended up biting us in the ass when it came to those plane hijackings. And I think if you look at what the mob was doing, training to kill Castro, and I think if the mob might have killed Kennedy using the same tactics, maybe some of the ones that they had on Castro. I mean, but here's the issue with that theory is that there were 693 assassination attempts on Castro and all of them failed. So
Yeah.
you're telling me one of those worked on Kennedy, which means
Well,
that
because Kennedy wasn't protected.
that's what I'm saying is that
That's the difference.
yes, well,
The se-
there's the involvement with the Secret
Castro
Service.
was protected.
Real quick, there's involvement with the Secret Service, and then you get into an aspect of I think what the CIA is still keeping on lock is the fact that they did train the mafia people, and the mafia people ended up taking out Kennedy. And the reason I think that could be a possibility is if you look at what Bobby Kennedy was doing, JFK had an agreement with the mob, but Bobby Kennedy was fucking tearing that all up and going after them hardcore. J. Edgar Hoover, even there's statements of him saying, "What mob? The mob doesn't exist." And people are like, "We're staring right at him." It's like, yeah, because they had dirty pictures on J. Edgar Hoover. So I think it's very complex, and I'm not even close to ever figuring this thing out. And I don't really want to solve it. I'm just trying to get a better understand for historical reasons of what the hell was going on back then. And I think you start noticing that there's a lot of lying that's going on, and the whole reason why we don't have an answer and it's lasted this long is because either people aren't being transparent with the information that they have, or they didn't do a proper investigation.
Yeah, you're right. And I mean, it's all true. It's not it's not a black and white thing where, okay, there was this conspiracy to kill the president and they covered it up. It's more complicated than that. There are reasons for the cover up. The FBI's covering its ass because they didn't watch Oswald. They had Hosty. He was on Hosty's caseload. They didn't even tell the Secret Service he was in Dallas because he was no threat. He was an informant for them, and they knew he was no threat. So that's why he wasn't. And so Hoover was taking all this hot water. Well, how come if the FBI knew about him and they had and Hosty took the blame for it, he was the patsy. How come you didn't tell them that he worked on the motorcade? Uh, and then the CIA is covering up all these illegal operations that they were running in Mexico City. So yeah, I mean, covering up names by now it's ridiculous because they're all dead. But they don't want their operate to know what they were doing. They don't want the American people to know what they were doing. They don't want the Soviets to know what they were doing at the time. So it could be very possible. Yes, Oswald believes that he's going to go to Havana. It's his next assignment, whether it's to kill Castro or whether it's to, spy on him or do something. So maybe he went to the embassy, okay, and signed the paper, did the thing. But meanwhile, the CIA, someone in the CIA probably was taking advantage of that and said, we could link him to the Soviet embassy and Kostakov, who is Department 13 assassinations, and we could link him to Castro agents while he's there doing his thing, what he thinks he's doing as a spy. We can tie him to them, and then we can put him down as the patsy when Kennedy's killed. and that would fit all the requirements. Let's frame the Russians, let's frame Oswald, let's frame the Cubans. And so, I mean, that may be we don't know because they in charge of if you ask the House Assassinations Committee and those people what the thing they couldn't get the CIA to cooperate on was Mexico City. They wouldn't release anything about it. They lied. They caught them in a million lies. We destroyed the tapes. All the cameras were broke that day. I mean, ridiculous stuff, you know.
When it comes to the Walker shooting,
Yeah,
did he take a shot at Walker?
that's another mystery.
When did he meet Ruby? Because people speculate that it was Ruby and Oswald. There was two people that were caught outside Walker's house.
All right, there was a boy that lived next door. Heard the shot.
I know. Posner told me that there was no witnesses, and I said there was.
No, there was witnesses. And this kid saw two men with a car, and they saw them open up the trunk and put a rifle in, get in the car, and leave. Now, Oswald is a unique assassin. He takes the bus to murder people or escape from murdering people. So supposedly, Marina, again, when the source is Marina, I don't believe anything she says. She said that he told her that he was going to shoot Walker, and that
and the commission asked, how did he transfer the rifle there? What did he do?
She said he took it on the bus.
Yeah.
And he when he shot at him, he buried it there and picked it up later.
Did he buy that rifle when he got back to the States? He didn't get that. He didn't transfer that from Russia, right?
No, there's the whole, that's a whole nother ball of wax. Right
because
there.
How do you get a rifle that's found in the book depository building that was so rusted it couldn't fire? Maybe he buried it and that's the damage that got there.
That could be. He bought the rifle mail order from Klein Sporting Goods in Chicago.
Under A.J. Heidel.
Under A.J. Heidel. And he bought the pistol from Seaport Traders in California under the name A.J. Heidel. He had sent to a post office box. And so you have to sign for it. Nobody signed. The only ones that could receive the mail were Oswald and Marina. And I think the one box might have had A.J. Heidel's name, but no one at the post office remembers anyone picking up a rifle.
No, the rifle was ordered under the alias A.J. Heidel and it was delivered to the P.O. box under Lee's actual name. And the reason why we know that is from Tom Graham, who studied the mail transfers, and the FBI agent that worked at the post office.
But the rifle was Marina or him, I think, could pick up the rifle. Anyway, no one saw them pick up, and one was, and the pistol was sent COD, so you have to sign for it, you know. So how do you send a gun to a post office box that has to be signed for? Someone had to live in the post office box and come out and sign for it. I mean, and nobody at the mail place, they would remember that stuff. They would remember, hey, a gun came here and someone came and picked it up. But what comes down to is that the government at that time was investigating interstate sale of firearms. And what they were trying to do was link these people that were selling cheap weapons across borders by mail they were going to prosecute them in court. And so they were using people like, and Oswald may have been one. You order this rifle, we'll go into court and say, look, you sent this to a communist. And, you know, they were going to close down this interstate. It was the Dodd Committee. So it may well have been that Oswald had an assignment, order these guns, you know, and use this name. So, you know, whatever. So we don't know any more about the guns than we do. Somebody's been covering up everything in this case maybe for innocent reasons, but and for not innocent reasons. But that's why it's so difficult now to nail anything down. It's like you know, trying to catch a fly. But that's the case.
I think you guys, every single researcher, you and everyone I've talked to, I think you guys have done great work. That's why I'm trying to highlight it the best I possibly can. That's why I'm very grateful for the time you've given me to be able to talk about it all these times that we've done all our many conversations. Um, it's an interesting subject because I mean, when we talk about the Tippett scene, the bullets that they found, were they not revolver bullets?
They did not match Oswald's gun. The shells did. The shells did, but the bullets didn't. And Oswald's gun was a 38 special. So what they do with the 38 special is they bore out the barrel so that it can shoot 2 or 3 different kinds of ammunition. And when the bullet is coming out, it wobbles. So you can't get a ballistics thing on the bullet to test, you know. But the shells, I think, were planted. I mean, if you were going to kill somebody with a pistol, his was a revolver. The bullets stay in there. So shoot them, go away, go somewhere and reload.
Not reload right on the spot.
Hide, get rid of. Instead, he's throwing the shells as he runs. Here's evidence. And the same thing with the wallet. It's the same thing with here's the copy. I think I'll leave my wallet here so they'll know who I am. And here's a picture of me with guns and weapons. There's too much evidence.
Yeah, the weird part about the wallet is that when they found it in the street, there were news people like, "Hey, look, we got this wallet," and they were like showing it to the newscast people. And then when I had Bart Camp on here talk about it, none of the people that saw the wallet or knew about the wallet talked about it when they were at trial or when they were giving their testimonies. None of them even mentioned a wallet, and you think that would be prime evidence.
It was on the news. I've seen footage of a picture of one of the policemen handing the wallet to another policeman. And it was mentioned on a newscast in Dallas that day. So there is a picture of
Yeah,
them transforming.
that's a
But
show.
yeah, but the story is the anonymous person handed that wallet to Officer Croy. Okay, the whole story was that Barrett found it or somebody, but none of that's true. Bill Simpies did a lot of research on this. This guy named this uniformed officer named Croy, Kenneth Croy. A guy come and handed it to him. Said, "Hey, the guy that shot him dropped this." So he gives it to Barrett or whatever. Okay, now when they arrest Oswald in the theater, he has a wallet with identification of him and Heidel, pictures, of him and Heidel there to prove, hey, this guy's the Heidel. This is the guy that bought the gun. Okay. But he has the same thing in the other wallet. They're identical. Okay. So they found this other wallet. They kept it a secret for 30 years, 20 years, till 70s, 75 or something. And it came out in Hostie's book. Hostie said, well, they found the wallet right where Tippett was shot, and that's proof that he did it. Well, then how come they never said that? They said, we took this wallet off Oswald. They never mentioned the other wallet. They never, ever mentioned that it was there. And so that tells you there were two wallets. It was planted. And they didn't know that Oswald would be caught. So we'll plant his wallet there. If he gets out, he skips town. We got proof he was the assassin of Tippett. Here it is. Here's the wallet with all the information. Instead, he gets caught in the theater and they take his real wallet.
Here's where I get a little bit confused. I'm going to ask a question about the theater, but I want to talk about the revolver casings real quick. Bart Camp said what's interesting is that when they patted him down the first time, they found nothing on him. Now, when they patted him down a second time, they found a bus pass, which is a flimsy little ticket thing. You could forget that. That could be something. But they found 5 fucking bullets. On the second time so that's a big slip up, unless someone's lying that they did not pat him down properly, or they might have planted evidence. Now, what I use to that is if he has 5 revolver things in his pocket, I either ask the question, how much ammo did he own? Or is it possible that if he did kill Tippit, he picked up his casings, and to make sure that Oswald was getting the blame for killing Tippit, someone planted fake ones on top?
Well, whoever shot Tippit dropped the casings because Benavides picked up 2 of them, and the Davis sisters picked up 2 more right when it happened. So there's no time for anyone to plant those shells there. But what did happen, could have happened, was once the shells were in police custody, they were switched because Officer Poe supposedly put his identification on him. There's no train of evidence. There's no chain
Chain
for
of
any of the
custody.
evidence. Yeah, no chain of custody in any evidence. The rifle, anything, nothing in this whole case. So they take them to the police where they keep the evidence, and so when they come back, they don't have Poe's initial on it. They don't, he can't say these are the same ones. So what they did was, I think they switched them, the police did, and it maybe was for the reason that I think what the reason why they changed why they framed Oswald was that Tippit was having an affair, and the police knew it, and he was shot when he was in Oak Cliff, supposedly probably seeing this woman. When his family this would really look bad for Dallas police. This would really look bad for Tippit's family. This would be a horrible thing. We have to protect him. So we have 4 shells we took out off Oswald. We'll take those and switch them, and that they were trying to protect a fellow policeman. So, I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me. But you look at there were 3 Smith and Wesson shells in Tippit and 1 Remington, and there were 2 Remington shells and 2 uh,
Smith and
2
Wesson.
Western Winchesters.
Okay.
So that doesn't match. So how did that happen? You know, but if they were bringing Oswald shells, that's what he had on him, so that's what they dumped, and it didn't match the bullets that were in Tippit. Tippit, I would really love to know what was going on with that. I mean, no matter what, it's all speculation in every case, but that is the key to the whole thing, and no one investigated it. Once Oswald was dead, that was it. They didn't investigate the Tippit shooting, and I think one of the reasons they didn't investigate it was that Tippit was, having that affair, or that Tippit was involved uh, in stuff, probably with Ruby. Uh, he worked, he was Ruby's sister said that Tippit was a good friend of her and Jack, and he had one time worked for, right next to he worked at a building right next to one of, Ruby's, bars, and then he was supposedly seen in Ruby's bar, and I think and then Alan Dulles on the Warren Commission during it's in the Warren report, he asked somebody, Dulles, "Is there any,
Wait,
is there
Dulles
s"
asked Dulles?
I mean, Dulles asked
Earl Warren?
no, it wasn't Warren.
Thought you froze. I'm sorry. He scared me.
He asked, Curry, Chief Curry, if he had any information about Tippit being involved in some way in drugs. And Curry said, "No, we don't have any of that." So why did he ask that question? Yeah. And who was dealing drugs, if anybody, was Ruby, you know? So,
Uppers, downers, and all that.
mhm, yeah, he was involved in a lot of stuff, prostitution and drugs, but that's what you do. He was a contact. So, I mean, you try to find a scenario that fits
Yeah.
that answers all the stuff, and there's still a lot of false things going around, and that's the problem. They've been accepted as true, and maybe they're not true. Um, and that researchers are somewhat to blame for that too. But without the researchers, we wouldn't know anything. They've done all the work that should have been done by uh, the Warren Commission and everybody else, but they didn't do it.
Well, I appreciate what the research community has done. I think it's very divided.
That's the problem. It's egos, just like anything else, politics, religion, anything else. People have their own ego and their own beliefs, and they want to believe something. They'll prove it if they have to, any way they can, and not because they mean to do harm, but because they think they're right. And so we have a lot of infighting. I've always thought that if the research community could get together and quit fighting and work for one goal, to solve this case, you know, and but there's constant bickering, constant fighting. When somebody comes out with something, the other researchers try to shoot them down because it threatens their belief. So
Well,
it's good
Gary,
and bad, good and bad, and everything.
yeah. Well, Gary, I appreciate the time you gave me to talk on my show, man. I always enjoy having you on. Seriously, thank you again for the time. Where can people find your links, Gary?
Uh, I have a website called the otheroswald.com and a Facebook page by the same name. And I have articles up there and pictures, and a lot of it's about Robert Webster, but there's a little bit of everything.
Well, I'm going to make sure I link it all in the description. It's been a pleasure chatting, and thanks for listening to this episode of Out of the Blind.